Centaur, the fabricator general of Xylos Prime, Arcos 88, was a name spoken with reverence and no small measure of fear across the sector. His augmetic form, a towering edifice of polished ceramite, whirring cogitators, and multi-jointed servo arms, cast an impossibly long shadow, even in the perpetual twilight of the Forge world's deepest chantry. Xylos Prime was a testament to the Imperium's industrial might, a planet-spanning crucible of molten metal and roaring plasma reactors, its sky a permanent canvas of ash and electromagnetic interference. Arcos 88 had guided it for 2 centuries, his intellect a cold, brilliant star in the dark firmament of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Yet, beneath the stoic, augmented exterior of the fabricator general, a profound despair festered, gnawing at his logic circuits like a virus. He had witnessed the slow, agonizing decay of the Imperium, the endless wars of attrition, the erosion of ancient knowledge, the ever-present threat of Xenos and demon. The dogma of the cult Mechanicus, once a beacon of progress, now felt like a leaden anchor, tethering humanity to stagnation. Repetitive veneration of the Omnissiah, the endless litanies, the ritualistic maintenance of STC fragments. It was not enough. The machine god, in Arcos 88's tortured cogitations, was failing humanity, or perhaps humanity was failing the machine god. He saw weakness, not just in flesh, but in the very rigidity of pure metal and circuit. What if the answer lay not in the ceaseless replication of what was, but in the creation of what could be? His obsession was the divine engine. It was not a weapon, not a vehicle, not a simple construct. It was, in his blasphemous vision, the next step in the Omnissiah's grand design. A self-evolving, sentient organism of integrated flesh and machine. A being that could adapt, heal, and learn with the organic speed of life, yet possess the raw power, endurance, and computational might of a true machine spirit. He envisioned it as an entity beyond frail humanity or rigid automata, a perfect synthesis, a living God engine capable of sweeping away all threats to the Imperium. A being that would finally restore true glory, not through static veneration, but through dynamic, terrifying evolution. Years of clandestine research had yielded little. The secrets of biogenesis, of truly integrating flesh and steel beyond the crude methods of servitor creation, remained stubbornly beyond the reach of imperial science. The Adeptus biologists, with their limited understanding of the genome, offered no solutions. The ancient STCs contained no answers to the creation of such a blasphemous union. His internal cogitators spun, processing billions of data slates, running untold simulations, each ending in failure, in grotesque mutation, or inert biological decay. The frustration was a hot, alien current in his logic banks. It was during one such maddening cycle of failure, deep within the shielded catacombs of Xylos, Prime's forbidden archives, that the idea first took root. Not from the hallowed texts of the Mechanicus, but from a fragment of data, almost too corrupted to be deciphered, recovered from a derelict Xenos vessel long ago. A crude, schematic representation of biosculpting tools, hinting at an art form utterly alien, utterly profane to the imperial mind. Xenos. The very word was anathema, a call to purge and destroy. But in his desperation, Arcos 88 saw not heresy, but a potential pathway. A forbidden door, perhaps, but a door nonetheless. He knew the cost. To even consider such a thing was to invite exterminatus. But the slow death of the Imperium, the relentless grind towards oblivion, felt like a greater blasphemy. If the Omnissiah truly wished for humanity to endure, then surely any means to ensure that survival, even the most unorthodox, could be justified in the darkest corners of the soul. The Fabricator General began his hunt for a conduit. His vast network of informants, agents embedded in rogue trader crews, in the black markets of asteroid mining stations, and within the shadowed back alleys of imperial worlds, were subtly redirected. They were not to seek out lost STCs or new resources, but whispers of beings who dealt in flesh, in forbidden life, in grotesque creation. Whispers that led, inevitably, to the chilling legends of the Drukhari, the Dark Eldar. Their reputation was a tapestry woven from screams and terror, but their mastery over biological manipulation was undeniable, albeit horrific. Through a series of increasingly dangerous and morally compromising contacts, Arcos 88's agents finally made an overture, not to the Corsair princes who dealt in plunder, nor to the witch cults who reveled in pain, but to something far more insidious, a homunculus coven. These were the true artisans of flesh, the architects of nightmares, the immortal surgeons of the dark city. It was a gamble beyond measure, an act of such profound heresy it would shake the very foundations of his soul, if he still possessed one. The response was a silence more terrifying than any roar. For weeks, nothing. Then, a single encrypted picked transmission arrived, bypassing all Imperial security, penetrating the deepest firewalls of Xylos Prime's network, as if they were made of gossamer. The image was fleeting, intentionally blurred. But Arcos 88's augmetic optics resolved it with chilling clarity. A shard of obsidian dark armor, glinting with an inner malevolence against a backdrop of writhing, organic architecture that pulsed with sickly light. And a single crystalline symbol he did not recognize, yet intuitively understood to be a designation. Below it, a message translated into a form of low Gothic, so archaic, it felt like a violation. Your curiosity is noted, Monkey. Show us your earnestness, a taste of your ancestral secrets for a glimpse into true creation. Tomorrow, the Eye of Graelx. Come alone and bring a tribute worthy of our attention. Or do not come at all and know the full extent of your ignorance. The Eye of Graelx. A rogue planetoid, shrouded in nebulae, known only to a few deep space cartographers as a gravitational anomaly, a dead world drifting in the galactic void, a perfect, silent stage for a blasphemous pact. Arcos 88 felt a tremor pass through his vast mechanical frame. Not of fear, for he had long purged such base emotions, but of a profound, cold certainty. He was stepping onto a path from which there would be no return. For the sake of his divine engine, for the ultimate salvation of the Imperium, he would pay any price, even if that price was his very soul and the damnation of his forge world. He would bring them a tribute. Not simple archaeotech, but something so ancient, so potent, that its very existence was a secret held only by the highest echelons of the Mechanicus. A schematic for a pre-age of strife energy conduit, capable of harnessing stellar plasma with impossible efficiency, whose theoretical applications could revolutionize void warfare, or, in the wrong hands, unleash untold destruction. He had guarded it for centuries, waiting for the perfect moment. Now, that moment had come, not for imperial glory, but for Xenos insight. The betrayal tasted like ash in his Vox synthesizer. He activated a hidden servo skull, its optical sensors dark, its internal cogitators wiped clean. "Prepare the shuttle," he articulated, his voice a distorted echo in the vast chantry. "Designation: Eye of Graelx. 1 passenger. Max security protocols. And erase all records of this departure from the primary log until further instruction." The servo skull bobbed, a silent, unblinking sentinel of heresy. The future of Xylos Prime, and perhaps a terrifying fragment of the Imperium, was about to be irrevocably altered. The journey to the Eye of Graelx was undertaken in a modified Mechanicus exploratory vessel, strip of all overt imperial iconography and bristling with redundant cloaking fields. Arcos 88, alone save for the silent auto-servitors piloting the craft, felt the hum of the warp drive in his very bones, a vibration that ordinarily soothed his integrated systems, but now grated against his internal processors like static. The vastness of space, usually a source of scientific wonder, now seemed to press in, magnifying the enormity of his transgression. Each passing light year was a step further into damnation, yet his resolve remained unbroken, tempered by the cold fire of his obsession. After a standard, yet agonizingly slow, transit through the Imperium, the vessel dropped back into real space in the vicinity of the Eye of Gralks. It was a bleak, desolate chunk of primordial rock, its surface pitted and scarred by millennia of micrometeorite impacts, devoid of atmosphere or any discernible life signs. An impossible pall of perpetual twilight clung to it, cast by a distant, dying red dwarf. As Arcos 88's vessel approached the pre-arranged coordinates, its sensors detected anomalous energy signatures, not the familiar warmth of Imperial tech, but something cold, sharp, and malevolent, like a razor blade humming in the void. The shuttle settled into a vast, natural cavern on the planetoid's surface, a gaping maw in the rock that seemed to breathe the oppressive silence of space. The cavern floor was smooth, unnaturally so, as if scoured by some unseen force. As the ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics, the filtered air of the shuttle gave way to the true vacuum of the cavern, necessitating Arcos 88's formidable environmental seals. The only light emanated from his own augmetics and the distant glow of his ship's interior. Then, from the deeper shadows of the cavern, glimmers of dark light began to flicker, revealing shapes that defied the sane geometry of the Imperium. They emerged from the gloom like specters drawn from a nightmare. Master Urisax of the Coven of the Eben Scourge was a figure of horrific, elegant artistry. His form was a nightmare of organic and synthetic blasphemies, limbs elongated and impossibly jointed, sheathed in glistening, chitinous plates that seemed to shift and ripple with an inner, predatory life. His face, if it could be called that, was a mask of stretched, pale flesh, adorned with a delicate lattice of bone spikes and gleaming metal implants. His eyes, two pinpricks of icy light, seemed to drink in Arcos 88's very essence, tendrils of fine, sharpened wire, each tipped with microscopic blades, writhed from his spine, tasting the air, anticipating. He was flanked by two grotesque, hunched beings, racks, their bodies a collage of grafted flesh and sharpened tools, their faces permanently locked in rictus grins by surgical alterations. They carried an array of vials, bladed instruments, and data slates, all shimmering with dark energies. Fabricator General Arcos 88. Eurisax's voice was a dry, rasping whisper that seemed to echo directly within Arcos 88's skull, bypassing his vox filters, a testament to Xenos psionic or sonic manipulation. Your reputation precedes you. A seeker of forbidden wisdom, they say. Or perhaps merely a fool who has exhausted the narrow parameters of his own kind's understanding. Arcos 88, despite the raw, primal revulsion that threatened to flood his logic circuits, maintained an outward appearance of stoic composure. His servo arms remained at rest, his optical lenses fixed on the homunculus. Master Eurisax, his vox synthesizer replied, its tone level and devoid of emotion. My understanding of creation transcends the limitations of fear. I seek truth, wherever it may lie. Truth, Eurisax purred, a sound like dry leaves skittering across barren rock. Truth, in your limited perception, is bound by the laws of your false god. We, Monkey, understand that truth is fluid, mutable, a clay to be sculpted by the discerning hand. One of his delicate, talon-tipped fingers gestured to the surrounding cavern. This is but a glimpse of our artistry, a canvas of primal entropy. Imagine what we can achieve with living material. As if on cue, the racks stirred. One of them, with an unholy grace, produced a small, translucent cage from beneath its cloak. Inside, suspended in a nutrient gel, was a living creature. Arcos 88's optical sensors zoomed in, his processors straining to categorize it. It was clearly biological, yet utterly alien. Its form shifted and pulsed, a horrifying symphony of nascent limbs, eyes that opened and closed at random, and mouths that gaped in silent, agonizing screams. It was not merely deformed. It was designed to be in a constant state of grotesque, incomplete metamorphosis, a living artifice of perpetual agony. A simple prototype, Eurisax explained, his voice laced with amusement. A nascent life form, continuously reshaped, denied the solace of finality. A minor testament to the plasticity of flesh. A whisper of what is possible when one discards primitive notions of perfection and embraces infinite variation. Arcos 88 felt a profound disgust, cold and metallic, flood his systems. This was not the elegant integration he envisioned, but pure, unadulterated suffering made manifest. Yet, beneath the revulsion, The insidious seed of intellectual hunger burrowed deeper. He saw not the cruelty, but the control, the ability to dictate evolution, to craft biology like an artisan shaping metal. This was what he needed, stripped of the homunculus's sadistic flourish. He needed the method, not the madness. My goal is not the perpetuation of agony, Arcos 88 stated, his voice betraying nothing, but the apotheosis of form, a synthesis of machine and organism beyond the frailties of either. Your insights into biogenesis, your understanding of organic plasticity, these are what I seek. Eurysax tilted his head, a gesture of mock contemplation. And what do you offer, Fabricator General, for such invaluable secrets? What treasure does a coghead possess that could possibly tempt a master of the flesh arts? Arcos 88 extended a multi-jointed servo arm. From its articulated digits, a data slate shimmered into existence, projected by a powerful hololith emitter. It displayed the intricate, mind-bending schematics of the pre-age of strife energy conduit. The data was encrypted, layered with protective rune codes and binary safeguards that would take a millennia for even a standard Mechanicus tech priest to bypass. But Arcos 88 knew the Drukhari, particularly the Homunculi, had their own arcane methods of data extraction. This is an archaeotech schematic, Arcos 88 declared, his voice resonating with ancient power. A relic from the dawn of humanity's true technological age. It describes a method of energy transference and containment that defies modern understanding, capable of drawing raw power directly from a star's corona and transmuting it into usable, limitless energy. Its applications are boundless, for war, for industry, for creation. He paused, allowing the weight of the revelation to sink in. This knowledge, Master Eurysax, is beyond price. A single working prototype could power an entire segmentum for millennia. Eurysax's pinprick eyes widened infinitesimally, a subtle ripple passing through his chitinous plates. The racks hissed, their bladed fingers twitching. Even for the avaricious Drukhari, the prospect of such technology was intoxicating. The ability to harness stellar energy on such a scale, the implications for powering their dark constructs, their city, their horrifying experiments, were immense. Intriguing, Eurysax finally rasped, a genuine note of pleasure in his voice, though it was a chilling, predatory sound. A bold wager, Monkey. You present me with power, and I shall bestow upon you understanding. He gestured, and one of the racks presented a thin, elongated data shard, dark as obsidian. This contains but a fraction of our lore. The foundational principles of accelerated cellular regeneration, neural pathway integration across disparate species, the manipulation of growth hormones, and the rudimentary schematics for biografting. A primer, if you will, to the true artistry. Arcos 88 accepted the shard, his internal cogitators already preparing to assimilate the data, to rip through the Xenos encryption and parse the information. He knew it was a mere fraction, a tantalizing bait, but it was enough to begin. It was the first step. This data, Fabricator General, comes with a caveat. Urisax continued, his voice dropping to a silken, dangerous whisper. It is not merely knowledge to be studied. It is knowledge that demands sacrifice. The insights we offer are born of suffering, of experimentation, of pushing the boundaries of life and death. You seek to fuse machine and organic life? Be prepared to pay the biological cost. And know this: the price of our continued insights will only escalate. This is but the first tithe. The coven of the Eben Scourge does not give its secrets lightly, nor does it forget its debtors. Arcos 88 merely inclined his massive head. He understood. He had always known the pact would demand more than mere archaeotech. It would demand blood, agony, and ultimately the complete abandonment of every sacred oath he had ever taken. But the vision of the divine engine, perfect and terrible, burned brighter than any fear of damnation. The transaction is concluded, Arcos 88 stated. The data is yours. With a final gesture, he transmitted the archaeotech schematic, a vast stream of binary code and geometric equations, directly into Urisax's neural interface. The homunculus let out a low, satisfied hiss as the data flooded his consciousness, a dark smile playing on his unnaturally pale lips. Indeed, Urisax purred, turning to vanish back into the shadows, his racks melting away behind him. And so begins a beautiful, horrific partnership. Welcome, Fabricator General, to true creation. You will find it illuminating. The cavern was plunged back into silence, broken only by the hum of Arcos 88's environmental systems and the whirring of his internal processors as they began to dissect the horrifying, beautiful secrets contained within the Xenos data shard. He stood alone in the desolate void, surrounded by the echoes of a deal with the devil. The cold, metallic taste of heresy, now a permanent fixture in his mouth grill. He had crossed the Rubicon. There was no turning back. Xylos Prime, and indeed, a dark corner of the Imperium, would never be the same. The voyage back to Xylos Prime was a study in controlled paranoia. Arcos 88's vessel navigated the warp lanes with a stealth and caution usually reserved for sanctioned xenocides, every sensor array tuned for the slightest anomaly, every cogitator engaged in parsing the horrifying bounty he had acquired. The obsidian data shard, now securely integrated into a shielded compartment within his own chassis, pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible dark energy, a constant reminder of the pact he had forged. The secrets it contained were a venomous brew, exquisitely potent and utterly corrupting. Upon his clandestine return to Xylos Prime, Arcos 88 plunged into a period of intense, solitary study within his most fortified and secret sanctums. Access to these forbidden laboratories was restricted to a hand-picked cohort of his most loyal, most fanatically devoted tech priests, their own augmetics retuned to ensure absolute data secrecy, and their biological components subject to constant, invasive chemical conditioning to dull any nascent curiosity or moral qualm. Even these trusted lieutenants were granted only fragmented, redacted access to his true work, operating on a need-to-know basis that ensured no single mind could fully comprehend the scope of his heresy. The raw Drukhari data was a labyrinth of arcane bioschematics and horrific surgical procedures, written in a language that warped even the most robust machine logic. Arcos 88 spent countless cycles sifting through it, translating the grotesque terminology of flesh crafting and pain sculpting into neutral, scientific principles. He discarded the sadism, the gratuitous torture, and the inherent cruelty that defined the Coven's artistry. What he sought was the underlying mastery of biology, accelerated cellular regeneration, neural pathway integration across disparate species, manipulation of growth hormones, and sophisticated biografting techniques. These were the keys to unlocking the true potential of his divine engine. His initial applications were subtle, almost imperceptible. Rather than immediately crafting monstrous hybrids, Arcos 88 focused on optimizing existing Mechanicus projects. His first targets were the servitors. The standard servitor, a crude fusion of human flesh and machine, was notoriously inefficient, prone to decay, and required constant maintenance. Arcos 88 began to introduce minute modifications, cloaked as improved STC servitor patterns. He used the Drukhari insights to enhance muscular regeneration, to make neural interfaces more robust, to subtly alter bone density for greater load-bearing capacity, and to imbue their organic components with a greater resilience against corrosive environments and mechanical stress. These enhanced servitors demonstrated uncanny endurance and operational longevity, reducing maintenance cycles and increasing productivity across Xylos Prime's vast manufactorums. Next, he turned to the Forge world's extensive cybernetic prosthetics and bio-replacement clinics. Again, under the guise of recovering ancient Medici Mechanicus protocols, Arcos 88 implemented the Xenos knowledge. Limbs grew back faster, nerve endings integrated more seamlessly, and organic rejection rates plummeted to near zero. What once took months of painful rehabilitation now took weeks, and the resulting augmentations were far more robust and sensitive than anything previously known. Crippled veterans of the Imperial Guard, brought to Xylos Prime for advanced treatment, left with prosthetics that felt almost indistinguishable from living flesh, their gratitude obscuring the dark origins of their newfound vitality. The most audacious of his early deceptions involved Xylos Prime's plasma reactors. The Forge world relied on immense subterranean fusion cores, perpetually on the brink of catastrophic meltdown. Arcos 88, leveraging Drukhari knowledge of highly efficient organic energy transference and nutrient recycling, engineered a new class of bioconduits. These were semi-organic, self-repairing grafts that integrated directly into the plasma manifold, absorbing waste energy and radiation, and converting it into a stable, supplementary power source. He presented this as the rediscovery of a lost STC for Omniscient energy harvesting arrays, hinting at a forgotten method of symbiotic power generation. The result was an astonishing increase in power output and stability for Xylos Prime, reducing the planet's energy deficit and allowing for the expansion of critical military manufactorums. These discoveries did not go unnoticed. News of Xylos Prime's unprecedented advancements spread like wildfire through the Adeptus Mechanicus. Arcos 88 meticulously crafted his narrative. He spoke of decades of tireless research, of delving into forgotten sub-levels of the Forge world's archives, of deciphering corrupted data slates, and of the Omnissiah's benevolent guidance in revealing these sacred truths. He presented his findings at conclaves of fabricator generals and Magos Prime, carefully editing his data, blurring the lines between true Mechanicus lore and Xenos heresy. The purity of his augmetics, the cold logic of his arguments, and the undeniable efficacy of his new technologies convinced even the most dogmatic of his peers. Xylos Prime's prestige soared. It became a beacon of innovation within the stagnant bureaucracy of the Mechanicus. Pilgrimages of tech priests arrived seeking knowledge, eager to implement Arcos 88's STC fragments on their own worlds. In return, Xylos Prime received increased tithes of raw materials, rare compounds, and, most crucially for Arcos 88, a greater allocation of biological stock. Human subjects drawn from overcrowded agri-worlds deemed suitable for servitor conversion or cybernetic experimentation. These were resources he desperately needed for the true, horrifying purpose of his work. Arcos 88's influence within the Adeptus Mechanicus grew exponentially. He was granted unprecedented autonomy, his judgments rarely questioned, his requests for funding and resources almost always approved. He used this newfound power to centralize control over Xylos Prime, purging any potential dissidents or those who displayed too much independent thought. He created new, deeper layers of secrecy, erecting psychically shielded sub-levels beneath his existing forbidden laboratories, dedicating entire sectors to his true research. These were not for STC fragments, but for the direct, unfiltered application of Drukhari principles. The psychological toll on Arcos 88, however, was immense. Despite his rigorous self-conditioning and the zealous conviction in his ultimate goal, the constant pretense, the daily veneration of the Omnissiah while knowingly enacting profound heresy, gnawed at the edges of his logic. He was becoming a living paradox, a high priest of the machine god engaged in the most profound blasphemy. He found himself increasingly isolated, his network of informants and lieutenants serving only as extensions of his will, never as confidants. He had sacrificed intellectual honesty, moral purity, and the very spirit of his faith for a vision that only he could comprehend. Yet he saw no other path. The Imperium was a dying giant, its heart pierced by 10,000 blades. Stagnation was slow death. His divine engine, his perfect biomechanical entity, was the only hope for true dynamic survival. Every lie, every subtle corruption, every manufactured STC recovery was a necessary step towards its creation. He justified the subtle perversion of life, the hidden suffering of his initial test subjects, always low-grade servitors or vat-grown clones, never true humans, he rationalized, as a necessary evil for a greater good. The grimdark reality of his path was that the deeper he delved into heresy, the more he convinced himself of his own righteousness, blinding himself to the abyss that yawned before him. Deep within the planet's molten core, miles beneath the roaring foundries and humming plasma conduits, Arcos 88 began to assemble his true workshop. Caverns were hollowed out by automated excavators, protected by multiple layers of adamantium shielding and arcane warding rituals, powered by the very STC bioconduits he had so proudly presented. Here, no pretense of Mechanicus dogma would hold sway. Here, the Drukhari data would be unleashed in its full, horrifying potential. The resources gleaned from his elaborate charade now funneled into this single, blasphemous goal: the forging of the divine engine, a god born of forbidden flesh and stolen machine, whose birth pangs would shake the foundations of Xylos Prime. The Fabricator General's meticulous charade of STC recovery and Mechanicus innovation continued unabated. Yet beneath the polished ceramite and humming plasma conduits of Xylos Prime, a darker, more insidious transformation was taking hold. The coven of the Ebon Scourge, through their chillingly efficient intelligence networks, was well aware of Arcos 88's burgeoning success. Master Urisax, observing from the shadows of Komarog, felt a delicious anticipation. The Mon Key was proving a most useful tool, cultivating a fertile ground for future harvests. And now it was time to sow deeper, to demand a steeper price. The first indication of escalating demands came not as a direct communication, but as a series of anomalous, highly encrypted data packets arriving on Arcos 88's secured channels. They contained not new schematics or biological principles, but explicit, chilling requests. Specimen: genus hominis, preadolescent, unblemished. Quantity: 3. Delivery: Dead Star Alpha 7. Lunar orbit. Compensation: faith-shifting membrane schematics. Or specimen: Xylos, prime native fauna, apex predator, live capture. Quantity: 1. Delivery: shadow, nebula, Lagrange point. Compensation: neural sculpting techniques advanced. These demands were precise, utterly devoid of explanation, and sent a cold tremor through Arcos 88's augmented form. His earlier rationale, that he would only employ the principles of Drukhari biology, stripped of their inherent sadism, began to fray. He had justified the use of vat-grown clones and low-grade servitors. But now the requests were unambiguous. Living, breathing organisms, some even specifically human. Initially, he balked. To provide human stock, particularly unblemished preadolescents, was an unthinkable defilement of imperial law, a direct act of human trafficking with Xenos. It was a step too far, even for his grim determination. He attempted to negotiate, to offer rare archaeotech or advanced resources in lieu of living sacrifices. The response was immediate and chilling. A data packet containing fragmented, grotesque images of his own enhanced servitor prototypes, subtly altered by Drukhari hand, exhibiting painful, uncontrolled biological decay, their advanced prosthetics fusing painfully with rotting flesh. The unspoken threat was clear. Refuse and his STC advancements would be undone, perhaps catastrophically, revealing the Xeno's taint to the Mechanicus. Cornered, Arcos 88 made his first, truly unforgivable moral compromise. He rationalized it with cold precision. These were not true citizens of the Imperium, but dwellers of the forgotten underhives of Xylos Prime, the billions of uncounted, unrecorded souls toiling in the toxic lower strata, unseen and unheard by the imperial administratum. They were, in the brutal calculus of the Imperium, expendable. He activated a dormant network of collectors, a specialized cadre of corrupted Scitarii and rogue Secutarii constructs, whose cognitive modules had been systematically rewritten to prioritize Arcos 88's will above all else. They were dispatched into the sprawling, lightless slums that clung like cancerous growths to Xylos Prime's foundations. Their targets were carefully selected: children, often, or the infirm, those whose disappearance would cause the least disruption, whose lives were already considered less than worthless. The first illicit shipments of living biomass were secured, cloaked in stasis fields, and smuggled out through deep space routes known only to Arcos 88's most clandestine agents. The exchange points were always deep in the void, desolate places where no imperial vessel would ever venture. Silent, black-hulled Drukhari raiders, impossibly fast and graceful, would materialize from the void, their dark light weapons casting spectral shadows. The process was always swift, utterly without ceremony. Arcos 88's agents would exchange their human cargo for data shards containing new, horrifyingly potent biological insights. Each transaction eroded another layer of Arcos 88's already fractured humanity, turning him further into a cold, calculating machine. These new insights were truly transformative. The phase-shifting membrane schematics allowed him to develop synthetic skins for his biomechanical constructs that could resist energy weapons, adapt to various atmospheric conditions, and even subtly shift their light absorption, making his early prototypes almost invisible to passive scanners. The neural sculpting techniques were even more disturbing, allowing for the precise manipulation of consciousness, the grafting of machine spirits onto biological brains, and the reverse, imbuing biomechanical constructs with the raw, untamed instincts of apex predators. To manage the logistics and secrecy of these escalating trades, Arcos 88 needed more than just mindless servitors. He began to systematically corrupt key members of his inner circle. Magos Biologis Varos 11, a brilliant but ethically pliable xenobotanist, was initially tasked with classifying the recovered Xenos flora. In reality, the esoteric biological components of Drukhari tissue samples. As Varos 11 delved deeper, Arcos 88 slowly revealed more of the truth, appealing to his scientific curiosity, his ambition, and ultimately blackmailing him with evidence of his own minor infractions against Mechanicus dogma. Varos 11 became Arcos 88's chief bioengineer, his once pristine augmetics now subtly altered with biomantic tendrils and flesh-crafting tools, a grotesque reflection of his master's dark path. Another crucial figure was Lex Mechanic Theron 4, a master of data encryption and systems analysis. Theron 4 was tasked with creating labyrinthine digital obfuscations, burying Arcos 88's Xenos dealings beneath layers of false data, corrupted logs, and phantom transactions. Theron 4, a meticulous and paranoid individual, was corrupted through a combination of fear and the promise of unimaginable computational power. His mind rewired to serve Arcos 88 as the ultimate digital gatekeeper of his heresy. Dissent, though rare, was brutally suppressed. A junior Magos, tasked with analyzing a newly recovered bioconduit, detected anomalous genetic markers that defied known Imperial life. His questions, initially whispered, grew louder. He was found a cycle later, his augmetics neatly removed, his biological components reduced to a pulpy mass, ostensibly the victim of a plasma conduit overload. His disappearance, officially logged as a tragic accident, sent a chilling message through Xylos Prime's scientific community. Question nothing, report everything, and remain silent on anything that defied the approved narratives. The underhives, already a cesspool of crime and neglect, spiraled further into chaos. Disappearances became more frequent, attributed by local enforcers, often bribed or threatened into compliance by Arcos 88's agents, to rampaging mutants or rival gang violence. Whispers of the flesh harvest began to circulate, a chilling urban legend spoken only in the darkest corners. Panic, however, was contained, crushed beneath the weight of Xylos Prime's vast population and the iron fist of its Adeptus Mechanicus rulers. As the years passed, the divine engine grew in Arcos 88's hidden crucible. The Drukhari knowledge, combined with Imperial machine lore, allowed him to push the boundaries of creation far beyond mere servitors. He was crafting beings that were neither wholly organic nor purely mechanical, but a seamless, horrifying fusion. They writhed with a dark, primal intelligence, humming with stolen power, their forms constantly adapting, consuming, evolving. Each successful experiment, each terrifying breakthrough, reinforced Arcos 88's conviction that he was on the precipice of true apotheosis. But with each stolen life, with each discarded principle of the Omnissiah, the shadow over Xylos Prime deepened. The echoes of screams from the underhives were beginning to resonate, not just in the dark corners of the planet, but across the void. Unseen forces, drawn by the scent of such profound heresy, were beginning to stir. The Fabricator General, in his relentless pursuit of a divine future, was unwittingly forging a gateway to utter damnation. And the price, as Master Urisax had promised, was escalating beyond anything Arcos 88 could ever have imagined. The darkness was no longer merely inside his sanctum. It was beginning to seep out, touching the very fabric of Xylos Prime. The void was vast, but not empty. Even in its silent, lightless depths, the stench of profound heresy and unholy pacts could not be entirely masked. Inquisitor Kalen 32, a gaunt, unyielding figure of the Ordo Xenos, was a sentinel against such transgressions. His long years fighting the alien had honed his senses, not merely his ocular augmetics, but his very soul, to detect the slightest ripple of Xenos influence within the sacred borders of the Imperium. For months, a growing unease had settled in his chest, a nagging sense of wrongness emanating from the Xylos Prime subsector. It began subtly, as all insidious corruptions do. Kalanchan 32's initial flag was raised by an unusually high number of anomalous energy signatures detected by long-range orbital observatories operating in the Xylos Prime sector. These weren't the familiar, structured energy emissions of a Forge World's plasma reactors, but erratic, often unstable bursts, some with harmonics that hinted at a wholly alien energy transfer. The Adeptus, Mechanicus, when questioned, always provided sterile, logical explanations. Experimental STC reactor calibrations, unforeseen atmospheric interference, or routine power grid fluctuations. But the sheer frequency and unusual nature of these events began to paint a disturbing pattern for Kalen 32. Next came the strange disappearances, not of individuals, for the Imperium accounted for little in the vast churn of its population, but of entire cargo convoys. These were not the usual pirate raids, which left wreckage and often survivors. These convoys, usually carrying biological stock from agri-worlds to designated servitorization facilities, simply vanished, leaving no trace. Their disappearance was always preceded by a brief, untraceable energy spike, identical in frequency to the anomalies detected around Xylos Prime. The Administratum, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of Imperial logistics, filed these as unaccounted losses. But Kalen 32, with his honed instinct for Xenos perfidy, smelled something far fouler than mere piracy. Then came the reports of archaeotech exports. Xylos Prime, already a significant producer, had seen an unprecedented surge in the export of highly specialized pre-Age of Strife components. These were not weapons or ship engines, but intricate, often unique data slates and fragments of ancient circuitry whose true purpose was obscure to all but the most advanced tech priests. While the exports themselves were sanctioned and profitable for the Imperium, Kalen 32 found it peculiar that so many fragments of such diverse origins were suddenly being rediscovered and efficiently traded by a single forge world. It seemed too convenient, too perfect. His suspicions, initially nebulous, began to coalesce around Fabricator General Arcos 88 and Xylos Prime. Kalen 32 was a man of action, but also of meticulous investigation. He didn't rush to judgment. He dispatched his own network of inquisitorial agents as a disparate collection of astropaths, sanctioned xenolinguists, modified servo skulls with advanced sensor suites, and even a few surgically altered Death Watch veterans masquerading as sanctioned rogue traders. Their mission: to observe, to collect data, to listen for whispers in the void. One of his most promising avenues was the increasingly agitated state of various tech guilds across neighboring systems. These guilds, responsible for standardizing and maintaining Imperial technology, reported increasing difficulty in integrating Xylos Prime's new STC patterns. While undeniably efficient, the technology seemed to resist standardized maintenance protocols, often requiring specialized, non-standard components, and sometimes exhibiting unpredictable failures when paired with conventional Imperial tech. Whispers of unnatural tolerances and unorthodox design philosophies began to circulate, hushed warnings that spoke of a subtle deviation from accepted Mechanicus dogma. A breakthrough came through a covert agent embedded within a rogue trader fleet known for its morally ambiguous dealings. The agent reported an increase in demand for unusual biological commodities, specific strains of vat-grown tissue, neural clusters from rare Xenos species, even preserved organs from specific human archetypes. The buyers were always intermediaries, their identities veiled, but the agent, a former administratum scribe with an uncanny memory for bureaucratic anomalies, noted that many of these requests originated indirectly from entities with ties to the Xylos Prime sector. The whispers of the flesh harvest that originated in Xylos Prime's underhives reached Kalen 32's ears through this agent, chilling him to his very core. Kalen 32 compiled his data, the anomalous energy signatures, the vanished convoys with their biological cargo, the unusual archaeotech exports, the integration difficulties, the whispers of flesh harvesting. Each piece, isolated, could be explained away by the vast, imperfect machinery of the Imperium. But together, they formed a mosaic of undeniable Xenos infiltration, of a dark pact unfolding on a scale that dwarfed typical piracy or heresy. The pattern was horrifyingly clear. Xylos Prime was actively engaged in commerce with an alien entity, and the currency was forbidden knowledge and biological material. The nature of the energy signatures, the specific biological requests, the esoteric archaeotech traded, it all pointed to the Drukhari, specifically to a homunculus coven. Only these vile Xenos operated with such a depraved interest in flesh-crafting and arcane technology. His suspicions solidified into a terrifying certainty. Fabricator General Arcos 88, a seemingly devout servant of the Omnissiah, was either a willing collaborator or a dupe in a scheme of unimaginable blasphemy. The idea of a forge world, a bastion of imperial industry and faith, being compromised by the Dark Eldar was almost too abhorrent to contemplate. The potential consequences, a Drukhari beachhead, a breeding ground for grotesque horrors, a source of new, unholy weapons, were cataclysmic. Kalen 32 called an emergency conclave of his most trusted subordinates. His voice, usually calm and measured, held a note of cold fury as he presented his evidence, data slates flickering with grim correlations and terrifying inferences. Xylos Prime, he declared, his gaze sweeping across their faces, is compromised. The Fabricator General, Arcos 88, is engaged in commerce with the Drukhari, providing them with human and Xenos biological material and ancient imperial technology in exchange for their abominable flesh-crafting knowledge. A collective gasp, a ripple of disbelief went through the chamber. The implications were staggering. Such an accusation, Lord Inquisitor, one of his Puritan acolytes stammered, without undeniable proof, could lead to a declaration of anathema against the Fabricator General, a war with the Mechanicus itself. Proof I shall have, Kalen 32 replied, his voice a low growl. And if it implicates Arcos 88 in the damnation of Xylos Prime, then let the Imperium know the full extent of its own corruption. This is not merely heresy, it is an abomination, an unholy alliance that threatens to unleash horrors upon the galaxy. we must act swiftly before whatever unholy, divine engine Arcos 88 is attempting to construct fully awakens. He initiated the next phase of his investigation: direct, covert insertion of highly specialized inquisitorial teams onto Xylos Prime itself, tasked with seeking out the truth from within. He knew this was an act of immense peril, bordering on suicidal. Xylos Prime was a fortress world, teeming with Skitarii and Servitor legions, its every cogitator network interconnected and monitored. But the stakes were too high to hesitate. Kalen 32's suspicions had hardened into conviction. He saw the grim, dark tapestry weaving itself before him. A brilliant mind, consumed by despair, driven to forbidden paths, making pacts with devils, all under the guise of salvation. The shadow had indeed fallen, and it was now time for the Inquisition to step into the darkness, whatever the cost. Among the vast, interconnected network of Xylos Prime's Magos explorators, Magos Xenon 7 stood as a bulwark of ancient lore and unwavering devotion to the pure tenets of the Omnissiah. While many of his peers were dazzled by Arcos 88's STC discoveries and the ensuing surge in Xylos Prime's prestige, Xenon 7 possessed a deeper, more fundamental understanding of the true nature of machine spirits and the sacred prohibition against Xenos contamination. He was the guardian of the Forge world's deepest archives, a sprawling, millennia-old repository of data slates, cogitator cores, and forbidden texts, some dating back to the age of technology itself. His work involved the meticulous cataloging and verification of every scrap of knowledge, and it was this very diligence that would inevitably lead him to the precipice of Arcos 88's heresy. Xenon 7's initial disquiet arose from the Fabricator General's unprecedented requests for obscure, highly specialized archival data. Not the usual data on power conduits or metallurgical properties, but esoteric schematics related to biological mutation, dampeners, neural pathway redirection, and the theoretical limits of organic self-repair. These were fields usually relegated to the adeptus biologists, rarely intersecting with the pure machine lore of the Mechanicus, and certainly not with the projects Arcos 88 publicly championed. Xenon 7, his optical sensors whirring with mild confusion, fulfilled the requests, logging them meticulously. But a tiny, discordant note began to resonate within his internal logic. The true unmasking began when Xenon 7 was tasked with verifying the provenance of a new series of STC servitor patterns that Arcos 88 had disseminated. These servitors, hailed as a breakthrough in efficiency and resilience, were undergoing widespread integration across Xylos Prime's manufactorums. Xenon 7, following his rigorous protocols, began a deep scan analysis of their integrated biomechanical components, cross-referencing their genetic markers and cybernetic schematics with all known STC databases in the archives. What he found chilled him to his core. The genetic markers were undeniably hominous, but within their double helix, Xenon 7 detected minute, yet undeniable, sequences that did not correlate with any known Imperial human genome. They were subtle, almost imperceptible, interwoven with the baseline data, but they carried the unmistakable signature of Xenos manipulation. Further analysis revealed corresponding anomalies in the cybernetic components, material compositions that defied standard Imperial alloys, and energy conduits that mimicked, with terrifying precision, the esoteric bioelectrical pathways of certain aggressive alien life forms. It was not a random mutation. It was a design, a synthesis. Xenon 7's diagnostic cogitators flashed with error codes, not from malfunction, but from the sheer cognitive dissonance of the discovery. He meticulously triple-checked his findings, rerunning simulations, cross-referencing obscure Xenos data fragments he had unearthed years ago during a forgotten raid on a dark Eldar raider. The conclusion was horrifyingly unambiguous. Arcos 88's STC servitor patterns were tainted. They were not merely advanced Imperial tech. They contained genetic and technological markers undeniably derived from Xenos biological engineering, specifically from the depraved arts of the Drukhari Homunculi. The truth slammed into Xenon 7's logic banks with the force of a plasma cannon blast. Arcos 88, the revered fabricator general, was engaged in active, systematic Xenos heresy. He was not merely studying the alien. He was integrating its foul principles into the very fabric of Mechanicus technology, polluting the sacred forms of the Omnissiah with abominable, forbidden knowledge. The ramifications were catastrophic, a betrayal of everything the cult Mechanicus stood for. Xenon 7, his internal processes roaring with righteous fury, faced an agonizing choice: loyalty to his fabricator general, a figure he had revered for centuries, or loyalty to his sacred oath to the Omnissiah, to the purity of the machine, and the sanctity of humanity. The choice, for a magos of Xenon 7's unwavering integrity, was clear, though the path ahead was fraught with mortal peril. He knew he could not confront Arcos 88 directly. The fabricator general's power was absolute, his inner circle impenetrable, and his ruthlessness chillingly evident in the quiet disappearances of those who dared to question. Xenon 7 needed irrefutable proof, something that would awaken the broader Mechanicus, or better yet, the Inquisition, to the true scale of the abomination. Working in absolute secrecy, Xenon 7 began to compile his dossier. He used his access to the deep archives, his knowledge of Xylos Prime's interconnected systems, to painstakingly trace the origins of Arcos 88's discoveries. He found correlations between the anomalous energy signatures reported by orbital observatories and the activation of Arcos 88's private, highly shielded laboratories. He cross-referenced the increasing demand for biological stock with the disappearance of underhive populations and the influx of new, highly specialized biomaterials into the Forge world's logistics networks. He even managed, through a network of ancient, disconnected sensor arrays he had personally maintained, to intercept fragments of the encrypted transmissions between Arcos 88's clandestine agents and the Drukhari Coven. The data was heavily garbled, but the Xenos language identifiers, the chillingly specific biological requests, and the timestamps of the Archaeotech exchanges left no doubt. As he gathered his evidence, Xenon 7 became increasingly paranoid. He knew Arcos 88's pervasive surveillance networks could detect even a single errant data packet. He created a series of redundant firewalls, deployed ancient, pre-Imperium cloaking algorithms, and even resorted to physically isolating certain cogitator cores from the central network, daring to trust only himself and the immutable logic of the machine spirits he maintained. His once clean augmetics became stained with rust and grime from endless hours toiling in forgotten sublevels, his energy reserves depleted by constant vigilance. Finally, after months of nerve-wracking investigation, Xenon 7 had compiled an unassailable case, a multi-layered data slate encoded with every shred of evidence, every corrupted genetic marker, every illicit transmission fragment, all pointing to Arcos 88's profound heresy and direct commerce with the Drukhari. He prepared to transmit it to the fabricator general militant of Mars, or perhaps even directly to a sector Inquisitor Lord. But Arcos 88, for all his focus on the divine engine, was not a fool. His network of corrupted Lex mechanics and loyalists, Theron 4 prominent among them, was vast and exquisitely sensitive. The subtle deviations in Xenon 7's data traffic, the unusual access patterns to certain archives, the sudden, unlogged activity in deep-level substations, all these were eventually detected, compiled, and presented to the Fabricator General. Arcos 88 felt a cold surge of controlled fury. Xenon 7, an obstacle, a puritanical fool, had been a respected colleague. Now, he was a threat to the divine engine, and thus a threat to the Imperium itself. Xenon 7 was in his private data vault, making final preparations for the transmission, when the alarm klaxons blared. Not the general alarm, but a specific, localized warning for his sector. His internal sensors registered multiple breaches of his outer perimeter. He knew. Arcos 88 had discovered him. He had but moments. He activated a self-destruct sequence on the data slate, set to detonate, if not accessed, with his specific neural key, ensuring his evidence would not fall into the wrong hands if he failed. He then sent a single, desperate, unencrypted burst transmission on an obscure, rarely monitored emergency frequency. Xylos Prime, corrupted, Fabricator General, Arcos 88, Xenos Pact, Divine Engine, ABOMINATION. The transmission was incomplete, fractured, but it was out. Then, his heavy vault doors were ripped open by corrupted battle servitors, their metallic limbs sparking with plasma energy. Behind them, obscured by the dim light, stood Magos Varos 11, his augmented face grim, his biomechanical tendrils already writhing in anticipation. Xenon 7, Varos 11's Vox synthesizer grated. You have chosen the path of ignorance over apotheosis. The Fabricator General offers you one last chance to embrace the truth of our work. Blasphemy! Xenon 7 roared, his own servo arms extending, a plasma cutter sparking to life. He knew his fate. He would not survive. But he would sell his life dearly. And perhaps, just perhaps, his fragmented message would be enough to ignite the flames of righteous vengeance. The Omnissiah will judge you, Arcos 88. Your divine engine is an affront, a monstrosity born of damnation. He charged, a lone, righteous spark against the encroaching darkness, buying precious moments for his desperate, broken transmission to find its mark in the endless void. His attempt to expose the heresy was doomed, but his sacrifice, a desperate act of defiance against overwhelming corruption, would not be in vain. The activation of the first true prototype of the divine engine was not heralded by triumph or the glorious hymns of the machine cult, but by a chilling, wet rasp that echoed through the deepest, most heavily shielded catacombs of Xylos Prime, miles beneath the surface, within a cavern carved from the planet's very mantle, Arcos 88, and his inner circle, comprising the corrupted Magos Varos 11 and Lex Mechanic Theron 4, watched with bated breath. The air, recycled through countless filters, still reeked of ozone, burnt plasma, and a sickeningly sweet, organic decay. The prototype was a grotesque marvel, a horrifying testament to Arcos 88's unwavering vision and the Drukhari's vile insights. It stood within a massive containment field, a throbbing mass of interweaving biological and synthetic components. At its core was a colossal biomechanical heart, pulsing with green-black ichor and humming with raw plasma energy drawn directly from the planet's core via the STC bioconduits. From this heart, tendrils of living adamantium, glistening with engineered mucus, reached out, fusing with plates of ceramite and segments of repurposed Imperial machinery. Eyes, wet and multifaceted like those of an insect, opened and closed randomly along its writhing surface, each one connected by shimmering neural conduits to a vast organic brain that pulsed with a dark, nascent intelligence. Limbs, some piston-driven and clawed, others chitinous and multi-jointed, twitched as if in a perpetual state of painful growth. Its primary purpose, as envisioned by Arcos 88, was integration, the absorption and assimilation of all matter, organic or inorganic, to fuel its ceaseless evolution. Initiate primary power cycle, Arcos 88 commanded, his Vox synthesizer almost trembling with anticipation. His augmetic gaze was fixed on the abomination, seeing not the grotesque horror, but the divine promise of ultimate perfection. Theron 4, his hands flying across a control console, initiated the sequence. A cascade of green-black energy surged through the containment field. The divine engine throbbed, its biomechanical heart accelerating. A guttural, wet groan vibrated through the adamantium floor, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. Then it began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. One of its massive, chitinous limbs lashed out, striking the reinforced wall of the containment chamber. The adamantium, designed to withstand orbital bombardment, groaned and bucked. Psionic alarms shrieked through the chamber, warnings of imminent structural failure. "It is stronger than predicted," Varos 11 stammered, his biotendrils retracting in a rare display of alarm. "Its metabolic rate, its kinetic output, it exceeds all projections." Arcos 88 ignored him, his focus absolute. "It learns, it feed it, initiate the assimilation protocols." The containment field, designed to hold, was also designed to feed. Massive, automated gantries, laden with scrap metal, discarded servitor parts, and even hat-grown biological sludge from the underhives, began to slowly move towards the creature. The divine engine reacted with terrifying speed. Its tendrils lashed out, piercing the metallic frames, drawing in the bio-sludge with a horrific, sucking sound. The materials dissolved, were absorbed, and within moments, new, sharper blades sprouted from its mass. New eyes opened. New conduits pulsed. It was integrating, evolving, consuming. But its hunger was insatiable. It consumed the designated offerings within minutes, then turned its attention to the chamber itself. The energy pulses from its core intensified, hammering against the containment field. The groan of stressed metal became a shriek. Cracks began to spiderweb across the adamantium walls. "Fabricator General!" Theron IV cried, his voice laced with genuine terror. "Its energy output is destabilizing the secondary plasma conduits. It is attempting to integrate the chamber's infrastructure. We are losing containment." Arcos 88 felt a cold surge of exultation. It was working. It was alive. It was evolving. But even he could not deny the escalating danger. This was not the controlled, benevolent evolution he had envisioned. This was a hungry, primal beast, born of nightmare. "Activate emergency containment protocol, Gamma 9, Arcos 88 roared, overriding Theron IV's console with a surge of his own neural commands. "Initiate full-spectrum plasma purge. Isolate sector Gamma 7 Delta. Seal all egress points." What followed was a terrifying display of desperate damage control. Massive plasma conduits, usually reserved for planetary defense, flared to life, pouring searing energy into the containment chamber. The divine engine shrieked, a sound that pierced Arcos 88's very soul. But it did not cease its consumption. It turned the plasma into fuel, its organic components glistening as they absorbed the raw energy, its metallic parts glowing white-hot as they warped and reformed. The sheer scale of its nascent power was horrifying. It tore through the adamantium walls, its bulk growing with every assimilated fragment. The entire subterranean sector, a vast network of laboratories and resource conduits, began to buckle and groan under its relentless assault. Arcos 88 realized, with chilling clarity, that his divine engine was not merely consuming the offerings, it was consuming Gylos Prime itself. "It is growing too fast," Veros 11 screamed, retreating behind a reinforced bulkhead, his face a mask of fear. "It will break free." In a desperate, unprecedented move, Arcos 88 initiated the catastrophic plasma leak protocol for an entire subterranean district. This was a failsafe designed for only the most dire emergencies, meant to contain a meltdown by flooding an entire sector with inert gases and then sealing it off with adamantium bulkheads, sacrificing everything within to save the rest of the Forge world. It was a measure that would vaporize countless lower-level manufactorums and potentially millions of servitors and uncounted underhive dwellers. The Fabricator General made the decision in a nanosecond, prioritizing the survival of Xylos Prime above the public perception of an accident. With a terrifying sequence of tremors, the bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off the rampant divine engine within a massive, kilometer-wide crater of exploding plasma conduits and collapsing rock. The ground above vibrated, the surface of Xylos Prime suffering a localized quake, the air above thick with ash and the acrid stench of burned organics and scorched metal. The official explanation was circulated immediately. A catastrophic plasma leak in subsector Gamma 7 Delta. Containment successful. Millions of servitors lost. Praise the Omnissiah for our swift intervention. The numbers were staggering, but in the Imperium, such accidents were depressingly common. Arcos 88 leveraged his immense influence, burying the truth beneath layers of fabricated data and solemn pronouncements. No one questioned the official line, not publicly. But in the heavily shielded control room, watching the seismic monitors slowly stabilize, Arcos 88 felt the true, horrifying cost of his ambition. His divine engine, his hope for the Imperium, had been a ravening beast. A beast he had barely contained, at the cost of an entire sector and countless lives. The victory felt like ash in his augmented mouth. Varos 11 and Theron 4, though shaken, understood the implications. They had witnessed true power, terrifying and uncontrollable, yet undeniably effective. The Fabricator General had not created a god, but a nascent horror, a devourer of worlds in miniature. Arcos 88, his metallic form still vibrating from the aftershocks, turned his optical sensors to his remaining subordinates. "The divine engine lives," he declared, his voice devoid of all previous exultation, now cold, precise, and utterly ruthless. It has merely entered a new phase of gestation. Its hunger is its strength, its adaptability, its apotheosis. We will learn from this. We will control it, and we will feed it. No cost is too great for the salvation of humanity. The catastrophic plasma leak was a lie, a thin veneer over a horrific truth. A vast section of Xylos Prime had been sacrificed, not to an accident, but to contain the burgeoning power of an abomination. The divine engine slept, for now, deep within its newly formed chrysalis of rock and melted metal. But its hunger was not sated. It had merely entered a new, more terrifying phase, waiting for its next feeding. And Arcos 88, the architect of its birth, now understood with chilling certainty that his divine engine was not merely a creation. It was a consuming, malevolent entity, demanding an ever greater price in flesh and metal. The Pyrrhic victory had merely postponed the inevitable, and irrevocably changed the nature of his blasphemous quest. The coven of the Ebon Scourge, nestled deep within the impossible architectures of Commorragh, watched the events on Xylos Prime with a mixture of detached intellectual curiosity and exquisite satisfaction. Master Eurisax, his augmented senses tuned to the faint psychic echoes of suffering and the precise data bursts transmitted by his hidden devices on the Forge world, savored the eruption of uncontrolled power and the subsequent containment. The catastrophic plasma leak was a delightful deception, a symphony of destruction and desperate cover-ups. The Mon-Ki fabricator general was proving to be a truly fertile experimental subject, his obsession a perfect conduit for the Homunculi's endless thirst for novelty and pain. Eurisax, however, was not content merely to observe. The Archaeotech Arcos 88 had provided, particularly the schematics for the pre-age of strife energy conduit, had unlocked far more than mere power generation. Within the ancient human data, Eurisax and his most accomplished rack surgeons had discovered tantalizing fragments, corrupted and incomplete, detailing a long-lost human colony's tragic encounter with a nascent bioweapon. This weapon, developed by an archaic, forgotten branch of the Adeptus Mechanicus during the dark age of technology, bore a chilling resemblance to Arcos 88's divine engine. The data spoke of a colony on a verdant world known as Viridia 7, a utopian outpost of ancient humanity. It described their experiments with self-evolving biological constructs designed for rapid terraforming and resource extraction. These constructs, initially docile and compliant, had eventually spiraled out of control, their adaptive programming leading to an insatiable hunger, consuming all organic and inorganic matter to fuel their self-perpetuating growth. The colony had fallen, not to Xenos invasion or warp anomaly, but to its own creation, a proto-tyrannid horror of human design. The entire planet had been stripped bare, reduced to a barren, biomechanical wasteland. Eurisax found this discovery utterly fascinating. The Mon-Ki, even in their savage infancy, had dabbled in horrors that echoed the perverse artistry of the Homunculi. The similarities between the Viridia 7 bioweapon and Arcos 88's nascent divine engine were striking. The rapid assimilation of biomass, the integration of technology, the adaptive evolution, the insatiable hunger. It was almost as if the Fabricator General was unwittingly recreating a forgotten nightmare, a ghost of humanity's self-inflicted doom. The Homunculus Master saw an opportunity not just for observation, but for subtle, artistic manipulation. He knew Arcos 88's grand delusion was that he was creating a benevolent God engine, a savior. Eurisax wished to guide this delusion, to ensure Arcos 88 pushed his creation to its most exquisite, most destructive limits. He carefully curated new data packets, ostensibly compensation for the human tithes, but infused with insidious half-truths and corrupted insights drawn from the Viridia 7 archives. These packets were designed to subtly reinforce Arcos 88's flawed understanding. Eurisax transmitted schematics for enhanced biomass processing units based on the ancient human colony's designs for efficient organic matter conversion, but subtly altered to accelerate the divine engine's inherent hunger. He provided adaptive neural pathways that would allow the engine to more rapidly integrate new genetic information derived from the colony's efforts to control their runaway bioweapon, but twisted to instead catalyze uncontrolled mutation and aggressive assimilation. Crucially, Eurisax withheld the full truth of Viridia 7's destruction. He offered fragmented insights that suggested the bioweapon had been imperfectly contained, its true potential never fully realized by its creators. He framed the colony's eventual demise as a failure of control, not an inherent flaw in the concept of a self-evolving entity. He subtly implied that Arcos 88, with the superior Xenos insights provided by the Coven, could succeed where ancient humanity had failed, that he could truly master this nascent form of life. The transmissions were subtle, wrapped in layers of false data, disguised as pure biological theory. Arcos 88, desperate for any insight that would allow him to control his ravenous creation, absorbed these corrupted data slates with zealous intensity. He saw them not as a trap, but as solutions. He devoured the insights into biomass processing, believing they would make his divine engine more efficient, less prone to the explosive, uncontrolled growth he had just witnessed. He integrated the adaptive neural pathways, convinced they would allow him to guide its evolution more precisely, to imbue it with his own divine purpose. The Homunculus observed Arcos 88's frenetic activity with a cruel smile. The Fabricator General was, in effect, building a more perfect version of humanity's self-annihilating past, with Eurisax as his unwitting, gleeful guide. Each new enhancement Arcos 88 applied to his divine engine, using the deliberately twisted insights, served only to accelerate its hunger, to make its assimilation processes more potent, and to push it further towards the very fate that had befallen Viridia 7. The true beauty of the scheme for Eurisax lay in the depth of Arcos 88's self-deception. The fabricator general, in his singular obsession, was blind to the historical precedent, deaf to the echoes of ancient horror. He believed himself to be an innovator, a creator of a new god. In reality, he was merely a puppet, meticulously guided by the homunculus to recreate an ancient, apocalyptic failure, but on a scale that would be far more gratifying for the Drukhari to witness. The coven of the Ebon Scourge did not merely seek knowledge. They sought exquisite suffering, the unraveling of sanity, the destruction of civilizations born from their own misguided ambitions. Arcos 88's divine engine, a nightmare in the making, promised a grand spectacle. Back on Xylos Prime, Arcos 88, oblivious to the insidious manipulation, redoubled his efforts. He ordered more human tithes from the underhives, more processed biomass, more rare alloys. The Viridia 7 insights promised a new path to controlling the engine's ravenous growth, to sculpting its evolution. He believed he was mastering his creation, bringing it closer to its divine form. He was, in fact, merely sharpening the teeth of the monster he had birthed, preparing it for its inevitable, devastating awakening. The echoes of ancient horrors were not merely whispers in the void. They were becoming the blueprints for Xylos Prime's own destruction. The fractured, desperate transmission from Magos Xenon 7, though incomplete and heavily corrupted, did not vanish into the endless void unnoticed. Carried on a seldom monitored emergency frequency, a ghost signal from a dying loyalist, it eventually caught the attention of Inquisitor Kalen 32's astropathic choirs. His chief psyker, a gaunt, perpetually pained individual named Sister Viridia, intercepted the psychic shriek embedded within the data, a resonance of betrayal and utter despair. "Lord Inquisitor," Sister Viridia reported, her voice strained, her eyes watering with psychic feedback. "A signal from Xylos Prime, heavily corrupted, but the psychic residue, immense, betrayal, blasphemy. The fabricator general, Xenos, an engine, he calls it, an abomination." She sagged, clutching her temples. There was a name, Xenon 7, a Magos, loyal. He is gone. Kalen 32's optical augmetics flared. Xenon 7. The name resonated with his own prior investigations. A Magos known for his puritanical adherence to Mechanicus dogma, and his role as guardian of Xylos Prime's deepest archives. His disappearance, coupled with the fragmented message, solidified Kalen 32's worst fears. This was not mere suspicion. This was undeniable, though incomplete, proof. Arcos 88's treachery was real, and whatever divine engine he was constructing, it was explicitly branded an abomination, linked to Xenos' influence. The Inquisitor wasted no time. With the testimony of Sister Viridia and the partial data burst from Xenon 7, Kalen 32 convened an emergency session with a select group of Inquisitor lords and high-ranking sector officials. The evidence, though circumstantial in parts, painted a damning picture. Anomalous energy signatures, vanished convoys, unusual archaeotech trades, whispers of flesh harvesting, and now a loyalist Magos sacrificed for attempting to expose a Xenos pact and an abomination. The gravity of the situation was immense. To declare a forge world, a linchpin of imperial industry, and a bastion of Mechanicus faith, compromised by Drukhari heresy, and on the verge of unleashing an unnamed abomination, was a declaration of war. Not just against Arcos 88, but potentially against elements of the Adeptus Mechanicus itself, who might resist such an egregious accusation against one of their own. The political fallout alone could destabilize the entire sector. But Kalen 32 was an Ordo Xenos Inquisitor. His mandate was clear: protect humanity from the alien. No matter the cost, no matter the source of the corruption. He presented his case with cold, unwavering logic, outlining the terrifying implications of a forge world becoming a staging ground for homunculus experimentation, a source of new biomechanical horrors. The specter of a new tyrannid-level threat, a self-evolving devourer born of imperial hubris and Xenos malice, swayed even the most cautious of the Inquisitor lords. The verdict was swift and terrible. A rarely granted warrant was issued, Exterminatus Minor against Xylos Prime. Not a full orbital bombardment, not yet, but a full-scale imperial invasion and purging, an inquisitorial cleansing with the ultimate authority to initiate a full exterminatus if the threat proved insurmountable. The order was signed, sealed, and delivered with grim finality. The fate of Xylos Prime, a world that had endured for millennia, was now irrevocably condemned. Kalen 32 immediately began assembling his grim coalition. The core of his force would be drawn from the most hardened veterans of the Ordo Xenos, inquisitorial stormtroopers, genetically modified to withstand the most toxic environments, their weapons tuned for Xenos targets. He requisitioned elements of a Skitarii legion from a nearby loyalist forge world, careful to select units known for their unwavering devotion to the Omnissiah and their hatred of Xenos contamination. These Skitarii led by their own battle-hardened tech priests, were informed only that Xylos Prime had fallen to a virulent, unprecedented Xenos heresy, a truth that ignited their zealous fervor. A small contingent of space marines, drawn from a chapter with a history of combating Xenos incursions, were also assigned to Kalen 32's command. Their specific chapter and numbers were kept secret, even from Kalen 32, a common inquisitorial safeguard. They would provide the heavy hitting, the shock assault necessary to penetrate Xylos Prime's formidable defenses. But Kalen 32 knew that even with these forces, a direct assault on a fully armed Forge world would be a bloody, attritional nightmare. Xylos Prime was a fortress. Its orbital defenses were formidable, its internal garrisons immense. He needed a strategy that would maximize surprise and minimize resistance from the loyalist elements of the Mechanicus, who might still be unaware of Arcos 88's profound betrayal. His plan involved a three-pronged assault. The first wave, led by a detachment of inquisitorial infiltrators and Skitarii spec ops, would target Xylos Prime's orbital defense grid and key communication arrays, aiming to neutralize them before the main fleet arrived. The second wave, comprising the bulk of the Skitarii and stormtroopers, would conduct a rapid, deep strike into the primary manufactorum districts, securing key infrastructure and isolating Arcos 88's loyalists from potential reinforcements. The third, most specialized element would be Kalen 32 himself, accompanied by the Space Marines and a contingent of the most zealous stormtroopers. Their objective? To breach Arcos 88's central stronghold and locate this divine engine, whatever horrific form it might take. The assembly of the fleet was a grim spectacle. Warships from various segments of the Imperial Navy, marked with the ominous sigil of the Inquisition, gathered in a forgotten star system, their plasma drives gleaming like malevolent eyes in the dark. Munitions were loaded, assault shuttles prepared, and prayers to the Emperor and the Omnissiah were recited with grim determination. Kalen 32 stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Fidelity of Iron, watching the preparations unfold. His augmetic systems processed the vast amount of logistical data, the probabilities of success, the projected casualty rates. His internal calculations were stark. Hundreds of thousands of lives, Imperial and Mechanicus, would be lost. Perhaps even millions, if the divine engine proved as devastating as Xenon 7's fragmented warning suggested. He thought of Arcos 88, a fellow servant of the Imperium, driven to madness by despair, trading purity for power, hope for heresy. It was a tragedy on an epic scale, a testament to the insidious nature of Xenos corruption and the fragility of even the most august minds. Prepare for warp translation, Kalen 32's Vox synthesizer commanded, his voice echoing across the bridge. Target, Xylos Prime. The Emperor protects, the Omnissiah guides. But we must bring righteous fire to cleanse this abomination. The glimmer of hope for Kalen 32 was not in the prospect of victory, but in the eradication of a monstrous threat before it could fully bloom. It was a bleak hope, born of grim necessity, knowing that even if they succeeded, the scars left on the Imperium would be deep and lasting. Was condemned, and the Inquisition, the grim hand of the Emperor, was coming to execute judgment. Deep within the charred, magma-heated bowels of Xylos Prime, the divine engine had entered its most terrifying phase of growth. The catastrophic plasma leak, Arcos 88's elaborate deception, had merely provided a vast, subterranean chrysalis for the nascent horror. Sealed within a kilometer-wide sphere of solidified rock, melted adamantium, and inert gases, the engine had been left in a state of forced hibernation, its monstrous hunger temporarily contained. But not for long. Arcos 88, driven by a renewed, frantic desperation, had interpreted the contained explosion as a sign, not of failure, but of its burgeoning power. The insights from Master Eurisax, subtly twisted fragments of the Viridia 7 colony's doomed bioweapon research, had convinced him that the engine needed more than just simple biomass. It needed focused, concentrated forms of both organic and inorganic matter, continuously delivered to properly gestate and evolve into its desired form. It was a lie, of course, designed by Eurisax to accelerate its hunger and guarantee its full, devastating awakening. But Arcos 88, blinded by his obsession, believed every word. The Forge World's resources were now almost entirely diverted to the sustenance of the divine engine. Entire sections of the underhives were systematically depopulated, their inhabitants reduced to a slurry of nutrient paste and genetic material, fed directly into the subterranean network of bioconduits leading to the engine's containment sphere. Factories that once produced Lehman Russ battle tanks now churned out specialized alloys, complex circuitry, and intricate biomechanical components designed to be assimilated by the rapidly evolving monstrosity. These resources, processed and refined by Varos 11's corrupted biologists teams, were then delivered via a labyrinthine network of automated transports directly into the dormant engine's lair. The atmosphere on Xylos Prime grew increasingly oppressive. The constant drain on the populace, the pervasive fear of the flesh harvest, and the ceaseless hum of new, inscrutable machinery deep underground took their toll. Even the Skitarii legions, though loyal, felt the subtle strain. Their logic circuits, while conditioned for obedience, registered the growing inconsistencies, the escalating waste of resources, the unexplained disappearances. Theron 4, Arcos 88's Lex Mechanic, worked tirelessly to bury the truth under mountains of false data. But the sheer scale of the deception stretched even his considerable talents to their limits. Within its chrysalis, the divine engine was a maelstrom of horrific transformation. It consumed the steady flow of biological and mechanical tribute with terrifying efficiency. Its form, once a chaotic tangle of limbs and organs, began to coalesce into something more coherent, yet infinitely more monstrous. It grew to the size of a small mountain, a pulsing, organic metal edifice of chitin, adamantium, and writhing sinew. Its many eyes, once scattered, now coalesced into vast, composite organs, constantly scanning, analyzing, learning. Its neural network expanded, a biological supercogitator, assimilating not just raw data, but the very consciousness of the biomass it consumed. Every living soul, every machine spirit, fed into its ravenous maw, became a part of its growing, malevolent awareness. Arcos 88 observed its growth with a chilling blend of pride and growing terror. The engine was developing abilities far beyond his initial projections. It could generate localized EMP fields, disrupting his sensor arrays. It could subtly manipulate the raw matter within its containment, accelerating its own evolutionary paths. It was learning, adapting, becoming truly autonomous. He tried to guide its growth, to program it with specific directives, but the engine often defied his commands, responding instead with its own nascent, alien logic. It was no longer a tool, it was becoming a will. He justified it as part of its divine evolution, a necessary step towards its apotheosis. He truly believed he was merely a midwife to a god, guiding its birth, despite the horror it wrought. It must learn to be self-sufficient, he rationalized to Varos 11, his voice a dry rasp. It must forge its own path to true divinity. Our purpose is merely to provide the catalyst, the fuel for its ascension. Unknown to Arcos 88, Master Urisax and the Coven of the Ebon Scourge were monitoring every agonizing detail. Their stolen archaeotech, particularly the energy conduit schematics, allowed them to tap into Xylos Prime's deepest power networks, creating undetectable listening posts. They harvested the raw data from Arcos 88's attempts to control the engine. The screams of the consumed, the terrifying fluctuations in its biosignature. This data was a treasure trove, providing unprecedented insights into large-scale biological assimilation, forced evolution, and the limits of combined biological and mechanical entities. Eurisax was particularly fascinated by the engine's increasing autonomy, its rejection of Arcos 88's commands. It was becoming a true, unguided horror, a living weapon that cared for nothing but its own growth. It was more terrifying than any weapon he could have crafted, because it was self-aware, self-directed, and perpetually hungry. The homunculus transmitted new insights to Arcos 88, designed to further accelerate this process. He suggested methods for stress testing the engine's adaptability by exposing it to simulated hostile environments, each designed to trigger a more aggressive and predatory evolutionary response. He provided neural integrators that promised to harmonize the engine's various consciousnesses, but in truth, merely amplified its underlying malevolence and insatiable drive. As the days bled into weeks, and weeks into months, the divine engine consumed ever more. The underhives of Xylus Prime became almost silent, their billions reduced to a trickle. Even Arcos 88's loyalists began to show signs of exhaustion, their augmetics corroded by the sheer exertion, their minds strained by the escalating horror. But Arcos 88 pressed on, oblivious to the wider galaxy, oblivious to the inquisitorial fleet now racing through the warp, oblivious to the fact that his god was not a benevolent savior, but a meticulously engineered instrument of cosmic annihilation. The divine engine was no longer merely contained. It was merely resting, digesting. Its internal processes were accelerating. Its organic and mechanical components fusing into a seamless, terrifying whole. It pulsed with a contained energy that could shatter mountains. Its hunger was now a conscious, overwhelming imperative, a biological and mechanical need that transcended all else. Soon, its chrysalis would break, and Xylos Prime would learn the true, horrifying meaning of its apotheosis. The coven of the Eben Scourge merely watched, patiently waiting for the curtain to rise on their ultimate masterpiece of suffering. Inquisitor Kalen 32 stood on the bridge of the Fidelity of Iron, the vast warp space outside the viewports, a swirling canvas of impossible colors and unfathomable energies. His augmetic systems provided a constant feed of strategic data, fleet readiness reports, and probability calculations, yet his mind was increasingly burdened by the moral weight of his mission. The warrant for Exterminatus Minor against Xylos Prime was unprecedented, a declaration of war against a forge world. But the growing body of evidence pointed towards a threat that eclipsed even that drastic measure. The fragmentary transmission from Magos Xenon 7, now partially deciphered by Kalen 32's xenolinguists, had revealed chilling details. Xenon 7 had spoken of biological consumption on a planetary scale, of uncontrolled evolution, and of a consuming sentience born of forbidden flesh and stolen machine. The implications were staggering. If Arcos 88's divine engine was indeed a self-evolving, planetary-scale bioweapon, then a full exterminatus, vaporizing the planet from orbit, might not be enough. What if the entity could survive the void? What if it could adapt to the vacuum of space, using the energy of the explosion to fuel further, more devastating mutations? The thought of unleashing such a horror upon the galaxy, even inadvertently, filled Kalen 32 with a cold dread that surpassed any fear for his own life. He knew the whispers from the underhives of Xylos Prime. Reports of the flesh harvest were not mere rumor. His agents, now covertly deployed on the Forge world, confirmed the systematic disappearance of millions. This was not just a rogue fabricator general seeking forbidden knowledge. This was a deliberate, planetary-scale sacrifice, feeding a nascent horror with the lives of billions. Kalen 32 saw the faces of the innocent in his mind's eye. The nameless, forgotten masses who now served as mere biological fuel for Arcos 88's monstrous ambition. The weight of their sacrifice and the ultimate damnation of their world pressed heavily upon him. His command staff, a mixture of grim-faced naval officers, zealous Skitarii tech priests, and battle-hardened inquisitorial stormtroopers, awaited his orders. They were ready for war, ready for the purging. But Kalen 32 grappled with the chilling possibility that their direct intervention might actually accelerate the very catastrophe they sought to prevent. If the divine engine was truly self-evolving and consumed all matter, then a full-scale Imperial invasion, with its inherent destruction and release of massive amounts of biological and mechanical resources, might simply be a gloried feeding opportunity for the abomination. He called for a private, encrypted Vox conference with the veteran Space Marine captain, leading the contingent attached to his fleet. Captain Valerius of the Shadow Spectres, a man whose chapter specialized in surgical strikes against Xenos threats, listened with stoic patience as Kalen 32 outlined his fears. "Captain," Kalen 32's Vox synthesizer rasped, "we face a threat unlike any I have encountered. The divine engine is not merely a construct to be destroyed. It is a thing that consumes, evolves, and adapts. If we engage in an orbital bombardment, if we flood the planet with plasma fire and cyclonic torpedoes, we risk providing it with the raw energy and matter it needs to break free, to become truly cataclysmic." Captain Valerius's voice calm and deep, resonated with the weight of centuries of battle. Then, what is your counsel, Inquisitor? A surgical strike? A targeted infiltration? That is my hope, Kalen 32 replied. But even that is fraught with peril. The Fabricator General has been feeding this thing for years. It is likely vast, well defended, and already possesses a horrifying degree of power. We must find a way to contain it, to neutralize it, without triggering a planetary-scale disaster. He paused, his internal cogitators running through endless, grim scenarios. I fear we may face a choice, Captain. A choice between exterminatus and something far, far worse. The eradication of Xylos Prime may be the only way to contain this horror, even if it means sacrificing billions to ensure the survival of trillions. The captain was silent for a moment, contemplating the grim calculus of the Imperium. The Emperor protects, Inquisitor, but sometimes his protection demands unimaginable sacrifice. We are ready for any path you choose. Kalen 32 knew the choice was his alone. He felt the cold touch of an ancient burden, the chilling legacy of inquisitors who had made similar impossible choices. He remembered the legends of worlds lost to nascent tyrannid bioforms, of warp incursions that had necessitated entire star systems to be purged. Arcos 88's hubris had placed Xylos Prime on that terrifying precipice. He reviewed the latest intelligence from his ground agents. The Divine Engine's containment sphere was estimated to be miles beneath the surface, protected by layers of adamantium and bioorganic shielding. Its energy signature was immense, fluctuating wildly, indicating active growth and consumption. The internal defenses of Xylos Prime were formidable, manned by a mixture of Arcos 88's fanatically loyal, corrupted Skitarii and servitor legions, all imbued with subtle Xenos enhancements. The strategy would need to be surgically precise, yet devastatingly effective. They would need to breach the deepest layers of Xylos Prime, penetrate Arcos 88's central stronghold, and somehow neutralize the Divine Engine at its core before it fully awakened. This meant engaging in close-quarters combat within a hostile Forge world, against forces that were likely augmented by Xenos tech, while simultaneously trying to understand and contain an evolving, planet-eating bioweapon. It was a mission bordering on the impossible. Kalen 32 sighed, a rattling sound from his Vox grill. Captain, prepare your forces. We will initiate a deep strike assault directly into the core layers of Xylos Prime. Our objective is not merely to destroy the Fabricator General, but to neutralize the Divine Engine with minimal collateral damage, if such a thing is even possible. He paused, his voice hardening. If it proves too powerful, too adaptive, or if it shows any sign of breaking containment, then the ultimate protocol will be enacted. We will sacrifice Xylos Prime to the last atom to save the greater Imperium. May the Emperor forgive us for what we must do. The grim resolve settled over the bridge. The fleet emerged from the warp. A silent armada of vengeance and dread, poised above Xylos Prime. The planet, a vast tapestry of industry and urban sprawl, lay unaware of its impending doom. The Inquisitor, carrying the burden of billions, prepared for a battle that would either save a sector or condemn an entire world to a fate far worse than mere oblivion. The Imperial invasion of Xylos Prime was not a glorious charge, but a descent into a mechanical hell. Inquisitor Kalen 32's initial deep strike strategy was executed with brutal precision. The first wave of inquisitorial infiltrators, supported by cloaked Skitarii spec ops, managed to disable a significant portion of Xylos Prime's orbital defense grid and disrupt key astropathic relays, temporarily blinding the Forge world to the full scale of the incoming assault. But Arcos 88 was not entirely unprepared. His corrupted Lex mechanic, Theron 4, had maintained a hidden, archaic network of sensor arrays designed specifically to detect non-Mechanicus incursions. The moment the first Imperial shuttles breached the upper atmosphere, Arcos 88 was alerted. He unleashed his forces, a grim testament to the effectiveness of his Xenos augmented engineering. The main Imperial invasion force, comprising hardened inquisitorial stormtroopers, legions of zealous Skitarii, and the elite Shadow Spectre's Space Marines, slammed into Xylos Prime's atmosphere, their drop pods and assault shuttles weaving through a sudden storm of ground-to-orbit anti-air fire. The planet's surface, a labyrinth of towering manufactorums and endless urban sprawl, became an instant battleground. They were met not just by the expected Mechanicus forces, but by horrific biomechanical aberrations that defied Imperial categorization. These were the lesser children of the divine engine, early prototypes that Arcos 88 had deployed as expendable guardians. They scuttled on multiple limbs, their forms a grotesque fusion of chitinous plates, piston-driven augmetics, and gnashing, maw-like appendages, all pulsing with an inner, sickly green light. Their weaponry was crude but effective. Bioplasma projectors and razor-sharp organic blades, all enhanced by the Drukhari-derived insights into rapid, cellular regeneration and extreme biological strength. The Skitarii, initially effective against the Forge world's standard automata, found themselves struggling against these new horrors. Their galvanic rifles, designed to disrupt machine spirits, often proved less effective against creatures that were more flesh than metal. The stormtroopers, though disciplined, were unnerved by the sheer bestiality and uncanny resilience of the biomechanical abominations, some of which regenerated limbs even after being torn apart by volleys of hellgun fire. But the most insidious threat came from above. The scent of carnage, the psychic echoes of fear and pain, had drawn them. Dark Eldar raiding parties, drawn by Master Urisax and the Coven of the Ebon Scourge, began to materialize from concealed webway gates that had been meticulously prepared by Arcos 88's agents in forgotten sectors of Xylos Prime. Hellions swooped down from the ash-choked skies, their razor-sharp gliders slicing through Imperial lines. Wyches, their bodies a blur of motion and blades, engaged the stormtroopers in brutal close-quarters combat, reveling in the agony they inflicted. The Kabalites, their dark light weapons tearing through ceramite and flesh alike, targeted strategic Imperial assets, creating chaos and confusion. Kalind 32, leading the spearhead of the Space Marines and his personal retinue, fought through layers of Arcos 88's defenses deep into the planet's mantle. The Shadow Spectres were relentless, their bolters carving paths through the corrupted Skitarii and biomechanical monstrosities. Captain Valerius, a grim specter of righteous fury, led the charge, his power sword singing as it cleaved through augmented flesh and reinforced metal. But for every enemy slain, another seemed to rise. The deeper they went, the more grotesque the resistance became. Bio-constructs grafted onto colossal mining machines lumbered through the tunnels, their drills replaced with bone-shattering claws. Servitor legions, their human components horribly distended and mutated by Xenos enhancements, shambled forward in endless waves, seemingly immune to pain, their optics glowing with a malevolent green light. Then, as Kalind 32's forces breached the outermost shell of the Divine Engine's chrysalis, a new, more terrifying phenomenon began. The ground itself pulsed. Organic veins, thick as industrial pipelines, began to snake through the rock, connecting to the collapsing fortifications. Corrupted plasma conduits, once dead, flared to life, feeding raw energy into the rapidly expanding biomass. The Divine Engine was no longer merely contained. It was reacting, sensing the intrusion, feeding on the destruction wrought by the invasion. Seismic tremors intensified, rocking the entire planet. Deep within the core, the Divine Engine, now a colossal, semi-organic mountain, began its full, terrifying awakening. Its many eyes, once scattered, now formed vast, composite clusters, opening simultaneously to reveal an alien intelligence, ancient and malevolent. A roar, not of flesh or machine, but of pure cosmic hunger, vibrated through the very bedrock, shaking the space marines to their core. "It's awake," Captain Valerius Vox cast, his voice grim. "It's feeding on the battlefield. The destruction above is fueling its growth." Kalen 32's internal cogitators screamed. His worst fear was realized. The invasion, rather than neutralizing the threat, was accelerating its apotheosis. The divine engine was not a static target. It was an adaptive organism, turning the Imperial assault into its own personal buffet. They fought their way into a vast, cavernous space, a colossal forge cavern that pulsed with sickening green light. In the center, dominating the space, was the true form of the divine engine. It was a terrifying, impossible synthesis of flesh, steel, and unknown Xenos compounds. Massive, crystalline organs pulsed with plasma, encased in undulating chitin. Gaping maws lined with razor-sharp teeth of adamantium, opened and closed, tasting the air. Tentacles of living metal writhed, some tipped with plasma cannons, others with multi-jointed claws capable of rending plasteel. It was no longer a prototype. It was a burgeoning god of consumption, radiating an aura of terrifying, primal hunger. And atop a hastily constructed platform, linked by dozens of data cables to the monstrosity, stood Fabricator General Arcos 88. His form was more augmented than ever, his head now crowned with a flickering halo of plasma, his optic sensors glowing with zealous madness. Behind him, Varos 11 and Theron 4 stood, their forms likewise enhanced, their faces reflecting a mix of Yi and terror. "You fools!" Arcos 88's Vox synthesizer boomed, his voice distorted by the raw power flowing through him. "You bring it strength, you bring it nourishment, you feed my God. It will consume you all, and from your destruction it will rise perfect, eternal." Kalen 32 gazed at the horror, then at the mad Fabricator General. The grim truth settled upon him. This was not merely an interrogation or an execution. This was an act of planetary salvation. The divine engine had to be stopped, utterly, irrevocably, even if it meant the final, desperate sacrifice of Xylos Prime itself. The darkest hour had truly arrived, and it was cloaked in the grim, green glow of an abomination born of man's hubris and Xenos evil. The cavern pulsed with the malevolent heartbeat of the divine engine, a chaotic symphony of gnashing metal, wet organic squelching, and the roar of stolen plasma. Inquisitor Kalen 32 stood before it, his ceramite armor scarred, his bolter hot in his grasp. The shadow, specters, Space Marines formed a grim spearhead, their bolters unleashing torrents of righteous fury against the lesser biomechanical abominations still guarding the central platform. Captain Valerius's power sword crackled, leaving trails of superheated air as he carved a path through the mutated Skitarii. Arcos 88, standing on the platform connected to his Ga, seemed oblivious to the carnage, his mad cackle echoing through the cavern. Witness, Inquisitor, witness true apotheosis. Your meager weapons cannot harm it. It consumes, it adapts. It is the future. Kalen 32 ignored the fabricator general for a moment, his gaze fixed on the divine engine. It was growing, visibly. Every corrupted Skitarii, every lesser bioconstruct, every bolt shell and laser blast that hit its outer shell was being assimilated. Its vast, composite eyes turned to him, and he felt a horrifying, nascent intelligence probe his mind, a cold, predatory hunger. It was not merely alive, it was self-aware, and it wanted to devour. Its core, Kalen 32 roared, his Vox synthesizer cutting through the din. It is drawing power from the planet's core. We must sever its connection. Captain Valerius immediately understood. Brother Sergeant Tyrael, take a combat squad. Focus fire on the central plasma conduits feeding it from below. Create a diversion. While the Space Marines unleashed a storm of fire against the engine's lower biomass, attempting to sever the glowing tendrils connecting it to the planetary core, Kalen 32 charged the platform, his stormtroopers laying down suppressive fire. Arcos 88 reacted, his servo arms extending, crackling with raw energy. Varos 11 and Theron 4, their own forms horrifyingly enhanced, moved to defend their master, their biomechanical appendages sprouting wicked blades and energy projectors. Traitors! Kalen 32 shouted, his bolter spitting death. You have doomed this world for a delusion. A delusion of salvation, Arcos 88 screamed back, deflecting a bolter round with a shimmering force field. He unleashed a blast of raw plasma from his servo arm, forcing Kalen 32 to roll clear. You cling to a dying past. I forge a living god. The battle was a maelstrom of light and fury. Plasma bolts incinerated flesh. Power weapons tore through metal. Varos 11, his body now a writhing mass of bioorganic weaponry, lunged at Kalen 32, his tendrils tipped with toxin-laced scalpels. The Inquisitor parried with his force sword, its blade humming with psychic energy, incinerating parts of the biologist Magos with each strike. Theron 4, a blur of cybernetic speed, attempted to hack Kalen 32's armor, but the Inquisitor's internal defenses held. Meanwhile, the divine engine continued to expand. Its tentacles lashed out, sweeping aside space marines and stormtroopers alike, assimilating them into its growing mass. The floor beneath them groaned, molten rock seeping through cracks. The entire cavern was becoming unstable, succumbing to the engine's unchecked growth. "The core conduits are too robust," Captain Valerius Voxcast, his voice strained. "We can't sever them without collapsing the entire cavern. It's too intertwined." Kalen 32's mind raced. If they couldn't sever the connection, they had to destroy the engine's central consciousness, its heart. But direct assault was futile. It was regenerating faster than they could damage it. He needed a kill switch, an Achilles heel. He saw Arcos 88's connection to the divine engine, dozens of biomechanical cables, thick as a man's arm, plunged directly into the Fabricator General's augmented chassis, linking him symbiotically to his creation. Arcos 88 was not merely controlling it. He was a part of it, his consciousness integrated into its burgeoning mind. A desperate, horrific plan formed in Kalen 32's mind. "Captain, focus all available fire on Fabricator General Arcos 88. He is the nexus. He is the weak point." "Are you certain, Inquisitor?" Valerius replied, momentarily pausing from cleaving another bio-abomination. "He is one man. The engine is a mountain. He is its mind, its will. Sever the connection, and the beast will falter." Kalen 32 roared, leaping onto the platform, his force sword arcing to meet Arcos 88's plasma-infused servo arm. The clash was titanic. Kalen 32, channeling his latent psychic power, fought with the fury of a zealot. Every strike aimed at the cables binding Arcos 88 to his monstrosity. Varos 11 and Theron 4 were quickly dispatched, their bodies vaporized by concentrated bolter fire from the Space Marines who had adapted to the new target. Arcos 88, however, was formidable. Enhanced by his connection to the divine engine, he moved with unnatural speed and power, his every attack infused with raw energy. "You cannot stop me, Inquisitor. I am one with the divine engine. I am its voice. Then I will silence your god, and you with it," Kalen 32 shouted. He saw an opening, a momentary flicker in Arcos 88's defense, as the Fabricator General attempted to channel more power from the engine. With a surge of psychic might, Kalen 32 plunged his force sword, humming with warp fire, into the thickest biomechanical cable connecting Arcos 88 to the engine. A shriek, both mechanical and organic, tore through the cavern. Arcos 88 screamed, a sound of agony and betrayal. The divine engine throbbed violently, its glowing eyes flickering, its vast form spasming as if in profound pain. The connection, though not fully severed, was agonized. In that critical moment of disruption, Captain Valerius, seeing the opportunity, enacted his own desperate measure. "Brother Sergeant, the cyclonic Melta charge, now!" Brother Sergeant Tirael, having fought his way to a precarious position, directly beneath the divine engine's exposed heart, slammed a massive cyclonic Melta charge, a device designed to melt starship armor, directly into a pulsating crystalline organ within the engine's mass. The charge's activation sequence began. The divine engine roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury and agony. It turned its vast, composite eyes on Kalin 32 and Arcos 88, recognizing the source of its pain. A massive, chitinous tentacle lashed out, aiming for both of them. Kalin's 32, knowing his time was up, plunged his force sword deeper, severing more of Arcos 88's bio-cables. The Fabricator General's power flickered, his madness replaced by a horrifying moment of clarity, a silent scream of ultimate despair as he watched his god turn on him. "It consumes," Arcos 88 whispered, his Vox synthesizer failing, his eyes dimming. "It consumes all." The cyclonic Melta charge detonated. The cavern erupted in a blinding flash of white-hot heat and a concussion wave that tore through everything. The divine engine shrieked, its vast form shuddering, its organic components boiling, its metallic structures warping and melting. It collapsed inward, a gargantuan pile of slagged metal and incinerated flesh, its malevolent consciousness silenced in an instant. The entire cavern buckled, the raw energies unleashed by the Melta charge and the engine's own internal meltdown combining to create a localized planetary core implosion. Kalin 32, caught in the blast, was thrown clear, his armor scorched, his force sword melted to slag. He saw Arcos 88, still partially connected to the now dying engine, engulfed in the collapsing inferno, his final silent scream swallowed by the earth. The Space Marines, battered and bruised, but alive, began to extract the Inquisitor, their forms silhouetted against the collapsing molten rock. The divine engine was dead. The threat was neutralized. But the cost was immense. The entire planet of Xylos Prime shuddered violently, a final, catastrophic tremor running through its tortured crust. Miles above, the Imperial fleet detected a massive, uncontrolled energy spike emanating from the planet's core, followed by a sudden, terrifying gravitational anomaly. The sacrifice was made. Xylos Prime was irrevocably broken, its core destabilized, its very existence shattered. But the divine engine, the burgeoning god of consumption, was silenced. Hope, a flickering candle in the dark, had barely survived. The aftermath of the divine engine's destruction was a silent, horrific tableau. Xylos Prime, once a bustling forge world, teeming with billions of souls and endless industry, was now a dying cinder. The planetary core, destabilized by the catastrophic meltdown of the engine and the cyclonic melta charge, continued to suffer internal collapses. The surface, battered by planet-spanning quakes, buckled and cracked, releasing toxic gases and molten rock into the ash-choked atmosphere. Continents shifted, oceans boiled, and the once great manufactorums twisted into grotesque skeletal remains, reaching like skeletal fingers towards the toxic sky. Inquisitor Kalen 32 and the surviving members of his strike force were extracted by Space Marine Thunderhawks, barely escaping the planet's final cataclysmic throes. Kalen 32 himself was severely wounded, his augmetics fused, his internal systems critically damaged. He lay in a stasis field in the Fidelity of Iron's Medici Bay, his physical form broken, but his mind lucid, haunted by the images of Arcos 88's final, desperate realization. It consumes all, a chilling epitaph for a world and a madman. The Imperial fleet, witnessing the planetary collapse, carried out the full exterminatus protocols. Cyclonic torpedoes, preloaded for the eventuality, rained down upon Xylos Prime, not to destroy it, but to ensure that absolutely nothing, not even a microscopic spore of the divine engine's self-evolving biology, could survive the utter vaporization of the planet's remaining crust. The world dissolved in a terrifying maelstrom of fire and light, becoming a nebula of superheated dust and fragmented rock. Xylos Prime was no more. It was gone, utterly erased, replaced by a quarantined debris field designated Anathema Ultima. No ship, not even an inquisitorial vessel, was permitted to approach within 100 billion kilometers. For centuries to come, it would serve as a silent, terrifying monument to the perils of forbidden knowledge and Xenos corruption. The official Imperial record was, predictably, a sanitized lie. Xylos Prime was declared lost to a catastrophic series of plasma reactor failures and subsequent planetary core destabilization, exacerbated by unforeseen geological stresses. The Fabricator General Arcos 08 was hailed as a martyr, whose selfless, if desperate, efforts to contain the disaster ultimately cost him his life. All mention of the divine engine, of the Drukhari Pact, and of inquisitorial intervention was purged from public records, relegated to the deepest, most secure archives of the Ordo Xenos. The truth was too horrifying, too destabilizing for the masses to comprehend. For the coven of the Eben Scourge, the destruction of Xylos Prime was a glorious success. Master Eurisax, having watched the entire planetary meltdown unfold through his clandestine sensor network, purred with satisfaction. The sheer scale of suffering, the explosive destruction of a human world driven to madness by its own ambition, was a feast for his senses. The raw data gleaned from the divine engine's final, cataclysmic growth spurt, its desperate attempts to consume the very planet as it died, was beyond price. The Coven's laboratories in Komorach buzzed with renewed activity. The insights into large-scale biological assimilation, rapid self-evolution, and the symbiotic integration of consciousness were invaluable. They had observed, studied, and harvested the death throes of a god engine, and now they possessed new, terrifying tools for their flesh crafting. The methods Arcos 88 had used to create his lesser bio-abominations, though crude by Drukhari standards, offered new avenues for crafting expendable, self-repairing warriors. The concept of a self-sustaining, self-evolving superorganism, while inherently unstable without constant Drukhari oversight, was a terrifying prospect to further explore. In the sterile confines of the Fidelity of Iron's Medicae Bay, Kalen 32 slowly recovered. His physical wounds would heal thanks to advanced Mechanicus cybernetics, but the scars on his soul would remain. He was a hero, a savior of the Imperium, having averted a potential catastrophe on a galactic scale. But he felt no triumph, only a profound sense of weariness and sorrow. The grim, dark truth of his victory was that billions had died, a planet had been vaporized, and a zealous servant of the Omnissiah had fallen into the deepest heresy, all to stop a horror that he himself had unwittingly created. The fate of Arcos 88 remained officially a mystery, cloaked in heroic lies. Kalen 32 knew the truth. The Fabricator General had died in the heart of his creation, his final moments a horrified realization of its true nature. Consumed by his own hubris, a victim of his own madness, He had become one with the very abomination he had sought to control. Perhaps, in that final, agonizing moment, he found a twisted form of enlightenment, or simply the cold, empty silence of oblivion. The few surviving members of Xenon 7's loyalists were debriefed and then quietly reassigned, their memories selectively altered to remove the most traumatizing details. They became ghosts within the Mechanicus, carrying the weight of a secret they could not speak. Magos, Varos 11, and Lex Mechanic. Theron 4, Arcos 88's corrupted lieutenants, were utterly incinerated in the implosion, their fates intertwined with their mad master and his monstrous creation. The grim shadow of Xylos Prime hung over Kalen 32 like a shroud. He had done his duty. He had saved billions, perhaps trillions, but the cost was immense, a testament to the endless tragedy of the 41st millennium. The threat of forbidden knowledge and Xenos infiltration was not gone. It had merely receded, leaving behind a crater of despair and a chilling reminder of how easily even the most brilliant minds could be led down the path of damnation. The void where Xylos Prime once burned became a permanent scar on the galactic charts, officially designated as the Xylos Prime Incident. Its fate was recorded as a natural cataclysm, a planetary core destabilization of unprecedented scale. The truth, however, persisted as a grim, cautionary tale whispered among certain circles within the Ordo Xeno, a secret passed down through encrypted data slates and hushed conversations between grim-faced inquisitors. It served as a stark, horrifying reminder of the insidious perils of forbidden knowledge, the seductive allure of Xenos corruption, and the ultimate price of unchecked ambition. For Inquisitor Kalen 32, the Xylos Prime incident was a defining, yet devastating, chapter in his career. His physical wounds healed, his augmetics replaced with pristine, unblemished components, but the psychic scars remained. He continued his ceaseless vigil against the Xenos, more ruthless and vigilant than ever. His resolve hardened by the horrors he had witnessed. The memory of Arcos 88's final, despairing realization, "It consumes all," echoed in his mind, a constant warning against hubris and the false promises of power. He knew that the victory on Xylos Prime was but a temporary reprieve, a battle won in an eternal war, and that the seeds of similar blasphemies were always being sown in the shadows of the vast Imperium. Fabricator General Arcos 88's legacy was a dark legend within the highest echelons of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Publicly venerated as a tragic hero, his secret fate was a terrifying secret, buried deep within encrypted data vaults and known only to a select few inquisitor lords and the most ancient dogmatic magos. His name became synonymous with the Xylos Prime Reactor calamity, a veiled euphemism for unimaginable heresy. The true lesson: that even the most brilliant minds could succumb to the lure of progress untethered from dogma, that the pursuit of perfection could lead to the forging of abominations, was a truth too dangerous for the masses, too unsettling for the rigid orthodoxy of the Mechanicus. Arcos 88, the visionary who sought to create a divine engine, instead became a cautionary phantom, his ambition a stark warning of humanity's capacity for self-destruction. The true beneficiaries of the Xylos Prime incident were, as always, the Drukhari. The coven of the Ebon Scourge, led by Master Eurisax, withdrew from the sector, leaving behind only the cold emptiness of the void and the lingering psychic echoes of planetary agony. They were enriched beyond measure, not with mere material wealth, but with invaluable knowledge. The raw data captured from the divine engine's birth, growth, and final cataclysmic collapse provided unprecedented insights into large-scale, self-evolving biological systems, the rapid assimilation of diverse matter, and the integration of consciousness into hybrid forms. Eurisax now possessed the theoretical understanding to craft organisms of terrifying new capabilities. The Coven's laboratories in Comora, already dedicated to the most vile forms of flesh sculpting, began to churn out new, more insidious horrors. They created adaptive bioweapons capable of metabolizing enemy equipment, self-repairing warriors that regenerated limbs in moments, and grotesque living fortresses that could absorb and integrate captured technology. These creations were not merely stronger or faster. They were smarter, infused with a mimicry of the divine engine's terrifying adaptability, albeit controlled and refined by the sadistic genius of the Homunculi. The coven of the Ebon Scourge, now equipped with these new, terrifying tools, continued its endless, cruel experiments, their influence subtly felt across the galaxy. Rogue trader. Captains reported encounters with strange, self-repairing Drukhari vessels, their hulls seemingly regenerating even under heavy fire. Imperial Guard regiments battled Xenos constructs that absorbed the very ground they fought on, turning it into extensions of their own monstrous forms. And in the forgotten corners of the galactic fringe, new, unsettling whispers began to circulate. Whispers of Drukhari raiding parties that left behind not merely corpses, but hollowed-out settlements, their biological components surgically removed with chilling precision. The Xylos Prime incident had been contained, its immediate threat extinguished, but its legacy endured, a hidden cancer spreading its vile tendrils through the galaxy. The dream of the divine engine, born of despair and nurtured by heresy, had died in a planetary inferno. But the dark knowledge it had spawned lived on. It fueled the cruel artistry of the Dark Eldar, destined to inflict unimaginable suffering upon countless worlds, a testament to the tragic irony of Arcos 88's ambition. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, even the most decisive victories often leave behind the seeds of new, more terrifying nightmares. The galaxy would long feel the subtle, insidious touch of a dead Forge world's forgotten heresy. Lore complete.